Hey guys, welcome to this video on a T-square in your chart in astrology. I'm Cassandra, the Saffron Sage, helping you use astrology to evolve, and today we're talking about what it means if you have a T-square in your chart and what you can do with it. So first of all, what is a T-square? A T-square is an aspect pattern in astrology that's made up of a square and an opposition. So there are two planets in opposition, that's 180 degrees, and there's one planet in the middle of that opposition, which makes a square to each one of those planets and ends up forming a T shape in the chart. So there are some common themes that we see because of the nature of those aspects. So let's break down the aspects and then we'll talk about the pattern as a whole. In opposition is a challenging aspect. And it's a challenging aspect where usually the opponent or the challenge is outside of the person. So it's not necessarily something within themselves. And I think of an opposition kind of like a seesaw where sometimes you're in that energy and sometimes you're in the opposite. And so what happens with someone who has an opposition between Aries and Libra is they're going to go back and forth between these two energies. 1 minute or 1 day or 1 week or month or year, they're going to be in that energy of self-assertion, of doing what I want with my life. And then when relationships come into play or partnerships with other people come into play, they're going to be in that other energy of, okay, so the question for someone with that opposition is going to be like, how much do I spend on others and how much do I spend on myself? And they might feel like they're always kind of teeter-tottering, and the goal with the opposition is to get it to like sort of balance out that teeter-totter so that you're like having a balanced experience with each of those energies. And you can still go back and forth because with the opposition, you can't really be doing both things very well at the same time, but that the extremes aren't quite such a big swing. So now let's talk about a square. A square is 90 degrees. It is a tense aspect, and with the square it's also a challenge, but usually the challenge is sometimes it can be two things outside of you, sometimes it can be two things within you, sometimes it can be something within you versus something outside of you. So nailing down a square can be a little more tough, but I think for the square it's really more of an inner tension kind of an aspect, whereas the opposition, it's still challenging. And don't think that challenging means that's bad about your chart. We'll talk about that. I'll try to address that later. But basically, the square is still challenging. It's still going to be tension. It's still going to be a little bit of inner angst or inner turmoil. So let's say you have a square between Gemini and Virgo. Then, Gemini is all about communicating and understanding ideas, whereas Virgo is more about control, it's more about perfection, it's more about trying to do things right. So while Gemini has a need to kind of jump in, explore, experience a few things, get your feet wet, and just go through that experience and then kind of go through it, sort through it in your mind, figure out, maybe talk about it before they come to any kind of conclusion. And for Gemini, a lot of the energy can really be on just the process of figuring all that out. It's mutable air. So it's like changing your mind, changing ideas, going through different ideas in your mind. That's important for Gemini. Virgo is more about wanting to know every little step of the way before taking that next step. And so if you have a square between these two, for example, you're probably going to have some challenges in life between the energy of jumping in versus the energy of holding back and trying to get it right and making sure you're doing it in the right order. So with the square aspect in the chart, this is more of a inner turmoil. So the difference to me between the square and the opposition is with the opposition, you're going to have a day like this and a day like that, a month like this, a month like that. With the square, there's more of a potential to waste that energy or not do anything with the energy, because with the square, it's more like, should I do this or should I do that? And this almost inner hesitation between these two energies wherever that square lands. So now let's talk about the T-square as a whole. The T-square as a whole is going to all be in the same modality. So it's either going to be a fixed T-square, a mutable T-square, or a cardinal T-square. And I will go through these. And the nature of the modality is going to kind of determine what that T-square is going to sort of do in your life. But the thing to know in general about this aspect is this aspect has a tremendous amount of energy and a tremendous amount of potential. So the challenge with the T-square is figuring out how to use it. Okay, the T-square is the Grand Cross, but missing one of the legs. So if you're comparing the T-square with the Grand Cross, the T-square is a little bit more of a figuring it out kind of an energy. Imagine a stool or a chair and you took one of the legs out. It's wobbly. You could probably still sit in it if you get it just right. And so for people with the T-square, there's that energy of like trying to figure out how this all works, trying to take all these energies and focus them on the right thing. So let's talk about the modalities. Let's just start with fixed. The fixed T-square is going to be if you have it in Taurus, Leo, Aquarius, or Scorpio. And so those are the fixed signs. If you have a fixed T-square, people with fixed squares, fixed energy, are going to be better at being consistent. Okay, that will be their strength. They're really, really good at maintaining things. The challenge for a fixed T-square or fixed energy in general is going to be change. So for fixed people, change is hard. Okay, change is hard. And seeing when changes need to be made and then being willing to make those changes, that is the challenge for someone with a fixed T-square. So let's now go over the cardinal T-square. With the cardinal T-square, you'll have it in either the signs Aries, Libra, Cancer, or Capricorn. So if your T-square planets are in those signs, you have a cardinal T-square. Cardinal energy is good at starting and initiating. For the cardinal T-square, it might be challenging to figure out what to start. Okay, so it's like there needs to be this sort of integration, this sort of clarity and purpose for the cardinal T-square person. Otherwise, they may feel that they just want to start things. You know, they may end up just with that desire to initiate, to really start something. But it's like, it's almost like I think of like pushing a car where it's a commitment. You don't just go one day and push it a little and then the next day push it a little more. Like you gotta just muscle through it and like know exactly where you're going, put your energy in that one thing and then do it. And so for people with cardinal T-squares, this is the opportunity they have. And it's not like this means that you only have one shot, you're gonna mess it up, but that there is more of a sort of focus needed for the cardinal T-square to balance out those energies. So the last modality is the mutable T-square. For a mutable T-square, this is going to involve the signs of Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces. So if your T-square planets are in those signs, you have a mutable T-square. So mutable means changeable. It means adaptable and flexible. People with mutable planets are going to be more adaptive. They're going to really kind of like go with the changes really easily. They can do really well in environments that cause them to have to change or adjust or adapt or just do different things all the time. They can be better at that, and they can kind of roll with the punches in life too with life changes. The challenge for mutable T-squares is focus. Focus and sticking with it. Okay, so this is a really hard thing for a mutable T-square because mutable energy is so adaptable that the natural reaction to challenge is to go somewhere else, do something else. And this can get so severe that it's like in the form of avoidance, where the person with the mutable T-square is, the second challenges happen, it's, oh, I need to go this way. So you need to really watch out if you have a mutable T-square, that when you're deciding to give up on something or to pivot or to switch directions, that it's really warranted, you know, and you really have to kind of learn and discern the difference between a challenge today, you know, a challenge this month that you're supposed to kind of stick through and face and feel and heal and move forward with, or the kind of challenges that really are the obstacles to go around. If you have a lot of mutable energy, you'll just go around every obstacle, but then there are times to stand firm. And that's what the mutable T-square needs to learn, is when and how to stand firm. So let's talk now about how to balance out a T-square. The way to balance the T-square, there's two ways to look at this. And In the T-square, there are 3 planets. There's the 2 in the opposition and the one that's squaring. The one that's squaring is at the apex. That is the apex of the T-square, and that is the one to start with when you're trying to find balance. If you find your life is out of balance, look to that planet. Look to what that planet represents. Look to the sign and how it expresses in that sign. And then look to the house to see what area of life this probably shows up for you. Whatever house the planet at the apex of your T-square is, that is going to be the area of life where maybe the challenge lies, or the area to find balance in order to move forward. And the planet involved, again, can kind of show you how that shows up in your life, and the sign as well. So that all being said, there is one other thing that you can try to balance out your T-square. And this is kind of debatable. I've read both. So I've read that you can look to and change that planet at the apex and just make sure it's functional. And the other way is to actually look to the one sign where the opposite of that planet at the apex, which is like, because the T-square, it's like a grand cross, but it's missing one piece. So find where that missing piece is. That is the planet, that is the sign and house that is opposite the planet at the apex of the T-square. It's like the empty place. And this is one way to find balance in astrology, is to go with the opposite sign and balance that out. And then that sign kind of balances itself. I think with a T-square you need to do both, because there's so much tension and there's so much sort of imbalance. This is a naturally imbalanced kind of energy, and people sometimes with T-squares will end up having just an intensity about them, or an inner restlessness. There is energy below the surface. So this aspect pattern is almost like Scorpio energy, in the sense that you have these reserves of energy below the surface that you can draw on. It's just a matter of knowing how to draw on them, knowing how to focus your energy in the right way that can help you use your T-square to your advantage. Because the thing about like a T-square versus a grand trine, or like squares versus trines, is, you know, when you're first learning astrology, you might be tempted to think, oh, it's a challenging aspect is bad and easy aspects are good. But it's not that simple, and sometimes it's the opposite, because easy aspects don't cause growth. Okay, so when we have challenging aspects in our chart, we can either rise to the occasion, you know, harness the energy, or oftentimes the energy harnesses us. There are people with amazing charts who do nothing with them but complain. There are people with really, really, really tough charts who have amazing lives and amazing stories. So your life is not determined by whether your aspects are positive or negative. And oftentimes it's the negative aspects that produce the challenge that allow us to grow. With a T-square, it's almost like a slingshot, okay? Like those 2 planets at the opposition are like the arms of the slingshot, and the 3rd planet at the apex is like where you pull it back and you get ready and you can launch. The challenge is knowing what to launch and how to really harness that energy. So if you want more on that, you can book a private reading with me, and I will see you guys in the next video.